Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of our podcast from Math. And today I have none other than Professor Gaurav Raina, academician, done his PhD from Cambridge, is also an entrepreneur and a vocal voice in the AI fraternity. He has been a pillar of knowledge and strength behind the UPI initiative and also behind many AI startups and innovations happening across India at policy level, at government level, and also at the startup level that he has been supporting. So I am extremely happy and proud that today we got this opportunity to have a discussion and a very candid chat with him. And I welcome Professor Raina for taking out time, traveling from Chennai to Hyderabad and sparing time with us. Welcome, Professor Raina.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me.
So do you see the reason I asked this question is that do you see a difference like 2018 and 24 Hyderabad?
There's a lot of hustle bustle. There's a lot of activity. You can feel the sort of economic pulse, so to speak.
Okay.
At least from a visual point of view, right? I mean, I think there's as I said, yeah, like you can get a sense that the city is on the move.
And how Professor Gaurav Raina or Gaurav Raina became Professor Gaurav Raina, the professor of IIT, and how he got into AI.
Sure. So all my degrees are actually in mathematics.
Great.
My PhD was in mathematics from the University of Cambridge. I was in the Department of Pure Maths and Mathematical Statistics. And then I also did my postdoctoral work in the same department.
Okay.
And during my postdoctoral work, I started getting interested in the sort of mathematics of large scale systems. Prime examples would be things like the internet.
Right.
Or transportation systems. And these pose, I think, very unique, interesting mathematical challenges, which also have significant real world impact. So in the postdoc, sort of 2.5, 3 years that I did in postdoc, I started exploring questions about the mathematics of large scale systems.
Right.
And so I started getting interested in this sort of applied math intersection engineering space, so to speak. Right. And so I finished, as I was finishing my postdoc, towards the end of 2008. Now, I always wanted to come back to India.
Okay.
Right. So that was sort of always on the cards,
Great.
so to speak. And, my interest in technology started growing. And to some extent, how technology can have either a direct or an indirect influence on society. I mean, look at the internet and the impact that has had. Or if you look at transportation networks and some such. So then my interest in technology per se also started growing. So if I wanted to come back to India, which was a natural choice for me, IIT seemed like a very natural place to kind of be, right? And in fact, one of the first places I came to or visit was actually IIT Chennai.
Okay.
You'd visit a couple of IITs, but that was one of the first places that I came to. And given my growing interest in technology, given my growing interest in the mathematics of large-scale systems, which were borrowed from the engineering discipline, and when I actually came to IIT Chennai, I saw the IIT Madras Research Park in its early days. And I maintained my position in Cambridge. I took a visiting position, and I first joined the computer science department.
Okay.
In IIT Madras. Now, interestingly, at that point of time, in 2008, the mobile payments project started sort of gaining a bit of momentum. Right. And that's how I got involved in mobile payments. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So I'll come back to that project a bit later, but then I was in computer science for 2 years. But my interest in communication systems and communication networks had really grown. So I then actually moved to the Department of Electrical Engineering. So to some extent, I traversed from math to computer science to electrical engineering. Very large-scale engineered systems like the internet, right? And so that kept my attention going for numerous years. And it's about 2014-15 that I actually started working on problems which were probably then called more data science. And my interest in data science started increasing. And I was looking at some problems in transportation networks. And what I suddenly realized is that these problems are hard. This is not just a simple application of some existing body of knowledge.
Right.
These are hard problems. And the more I looked around in different industries, And it was clear that the digitization was happening on the whole, that more and more data will become available, and these problems were getting harder and harder and harder. And so in that sort of evolution, roughly from 2013, 14 onwards, I then realized that this is an area that was obviously going to require a lot of sort of attention, a lot of expertise. And so I then actually incubated a company in data science and AI in 2019 through the IIT Madras incubation cell. And then, of course, in 2020 was the pandemic. So in 2021, 22, we sort of just about survived. And then you wake up in 23, and the world seems to be in an accelerated mode with ChatGPT,
Great.
and so on and so forth. So this was sort of one evolution, right? But just to give a sort of a fuller picture, in parallel, I was very involved with the Mobile Payment Forum of India, which was the entity that got all the stakeholders together to help develop the standards for
Right.
what eventually led to IMPS,
Right.
which then morphed and moved on to UPI.
Right.
And so there I had this sort of wonderful opportunity of being part of the of that ecosystem, where I was chair of the technology committee from 2009 to 13, and then chair of the forum itself from 2017 to 2021. And then in 2022, I was invited by the National Health Authority to be part of the health stack. And then beginning of 2024, I'm now working on behalf of IIT Madras as a principal investigator for applications of machine learning and AI in the Supreme Court of India.
Okay.
So to some extent, there's been a parallelization of the academic world and entrepreneurial world, and the work that I've been doing, which could broadly be classified as tech for social good.
Wonderful journey. And there I can't stop myself from asking this question. Like many experts and many people like from academia or corporate who are actually working as mentors with us and with our startups. So candidly, I have asked them many times, like you have such great command over your area, and why you yourself have not started any startup.
Right.
And I'm glad that I got you here who actually have done that. You're not only teaching, you're not only advising, but you yourself have started a startup.
Yes.
So from where that motivation come? Because many times the people who are expert in certain areas, they love to be just the advisor
Correct.
or the mentor or just be support system. They never take that plunge into that uncertain world of entrepreneurship, where you have a lot of different ball game, which is it.
Yes.
And what motivated you? What and why you did that? And what is the problem that you're solving through that?
I think there's one difference, I think, between, let's say, being an advisor
Right.
and being on the ground, so to speak, actually fixing problems, right? And that is, unless you are on the ground fixing problems, it's I think harder to really think incredibly creatively about delivering the solution, because the pressure is actually on you, right? In abstraction, as an advisor, you can always say, hey, why don't you do this, that, and the other, right? But I think when you get a feel of how do you get AI to work, you actually have to do the work.
That's wonderful.
It's not about saying, well, you have this body, and the role of mentors or advisors is absolutely important.
Correct. Absolutely.
But I thought that if one actually took the plunge and started something, right, then the pressure of delivery, pressure of delivering value in time, to the extent that somebody is willing to pay you for it, right? Because that's the critical part, right?
Right.
Somebody is actually willing you to pay for it. And I think when you're actually developing solutions yourself, I think that churn is what leads to the innovative process. That doing the work as well gives you a very good sense of how do you actually make AI work across industries,
Right.
in a manner that it is valuable to the company. So the idea of starting up initially was to, I didn't have a product in mind,
Okay.
right? So I didn't have a product in mind. The idea was that at some point of time, I would sort of probably converge
You started with services first.
Started in a sense with services, right?
Okay.
So, sort of simplistically put, rather than digital transformation, you're looking at the sort of intelligence transformation. See where you are today, and let me help guide you to where you ought to be. But not just guide you from a mentorship point of view. Let me actually pick up a few problems from you, develop solutions, and give them back to you.
Right.
And so, what I thought, what might be a sensible thing to do was to do that not just in a sector, but to do that in at least 4 or 5 different sectors. So you get a very good sense of what works, what are domain-specific issues, and what are more generic issues around the applicability of AI within those sectors. So I worked with companies in financial services, in telecommunications, in cybersecurity, in transportation networks, in transportation systems, so literally across the board. And it was hard work, I must say, right? But I've learned a lot. Yeah, I've learned a lot.
I can sense that strong feeling of an urge that you are having to do things very quickly and to get the outcomes. That is also one thing that is my takeaway. So you're not always very satisfied by sitting on the side and just waiting that someone will do it and I will give the thoughts, but you took the ownership in your own hand because you have a very strong urge of delivering.
Yes, and I think you learn different things. I mean,
Correct, absolutely.
It's the learning experience. So to speak,
when you get into the water,
when you get into the water, and in fact, now it's almost come full circle. And I'll tell you what I mean by the full circle. It's not just sort of using some expertise and the learnings you have to actually provide a solution to industry.
Right.
Over the last 2 years, I've actually started publishing
better papers,
research papers with industry.
Okay.
From their problems. Not just better papers because I have a better sense of the right mix of industry, academia, or theory and practice. But I've actually started publishing papers with these companies.
Is it because this experience or this initiative or this effort get you more network of industry? Or is it like you started understanding industry from a different perspective?
I would say a bit of the latter.
Okay.
Right? So of course, the more you work and the more experience you get, obviously you'll be more networked, so to speak.
Right.
But I think it was a question of then me telling this industry, and how it also depends on you develop the relationship with industry, right?
Correct.
And say, look, I can solve this what industry calls use case, but you know what? This is a bigger problem than a use case, and you're looking at relatively short time scales. You're not looking at a 10-year research agenda, right? But you're not looking at a 6-month use case horizon. You're looking at a 1 to 2 year, 3-year horizon.
Right, absolutely.
Right. So that then leads to IP development. That leads to branding. That leads to, hey, here's a real problem from the real world. So it's good for the industry partner and it's good for me because I can say, this is a real problem faced by industry here and now. Right. And our paper represents state-of-the-art industry problems. And it gives the industry an opportunity to say, hey, we've developed IP. Right? Look at our thought leadership. The rest of the industry says this is a use case. We've actually made a sub area out of it.
Right. How your journey started with UPI, where it came, who got hold of whom?
Sure. There was an entity known as the Mobile Payment Forum of India.
Right.
That had all the stakeholders as part of that forum.
Right.
It had policymakers. It had the Reserve Bank of India. It had IDRBT. It had industry. It had the banks. It had the telecom providers. It had the technology solution providers. And it had IIT Madras as a knowledge partner. Right. So the entire ecosystem had come together.
Right, obviously.
And obviously, everybody, lots of parts of the ecosystem would have had different competing incentive structures. Right. But this forum had come together to put the notion of public good front and center. Right. Okay. In that, to just give a sense of how that the Mobile Payment Forum of India was structured, there was a chair of that. There was a co-chair. The first chair was Professor Junjunwala from IIT Madras.
Yeah.
The co-chair was Dr. Burman, who was an ex-director from the Reserve Bank of India. You had an executive committee, and you had 3 different committees: the technology committee, a regulatory committee, and a business committee to give a sort of 360-degree view of this. So my particular role was that I was the first chair of the technology committee. And the role of the technology committee was to set up standards across interoperability, performance, and security. Right? So that was the key pillars for this. This is what led to the architectures for mobile payments. The first product that came out was IMPS, the immediate payment service. Right? And that was a push-based transaction. Now, just to give a sort of historical sense, so IMPS was then, so the standards were set by the Mobile Payment Forum of India,
Right.
Agreed upon by the entire forum, and ratified by the Reserve Bank of India, and then was subsequently implemented by the National Payments Corporation of India. So when we had IMPS, it was a kind of a big success. It's like,
Absolutely.
wow, okay,
Yeah.
we've got a real-time payment system, right? I mean, it was great, except that at that point of time, now you're talking end 2010,
Mm-hmm.
we had basic phones. You had the Nokia 1100 phones, then you press a button, light comes out. Like, hey.
Right.
In fact, calling was so expensive, we used to use missed calls, right? SMS was expensive,
Right.
right? And you had this sort of era of missed calls. So then the question was, well, you got these standards working, and you got a product out of it, which is IMPS, but then how do we get it in the hands of people? And so then then the next role of the technology committee was to actually construct a USSD protocol,
Mm-hmm.
which did not need the internet to work. Right? So if you just dialed *99# from any phone, feature phone, you get a financial services menu. You did not have to download an app. And we frankly all thought that this would completely revolutionize payments in the country. It's like, wow, great. It didn't work out that way. The adoption was very, very,
Very less, yeah.
slow. Right? So there's 2011, 12, 13, 14. Then in 2014, 15, we started getting internet on mobile phones, right? And so now you have a much more user-friendly interface sitting with you, which then gave a great opportunity to actually say, hey, let's do IMPS plus. So not just a push-based transaction, but even a pull-based transaction. I can pay you money, I can even ask you money.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I don't have to have a mobile number and an IFS code. Let me morph it into a virtual payment address. And that actually effectively led to the birth of UPI in 2016.
Right.
Right? And then in 2017, I actually then became the chairman of the Mobile Payment Forum of India. And that was from then 2017 to 2021. So there was the dream phase, which led to IMPS. And then there were innovations along the way, like USSD. And then when there were technological changes in the environment, we had UPI, which then was in the scale phase. So that's the a nutshell of the UPI story. And I think the real thing to take away from the UPI story is, I think it really celebrates the collective.
Absolutely.
It really celebrates the collective. Right? It's not something that any one institution or a group of people, it really, really celebrates the collective. And it really celebrates unlike minds coming together.
Right.
Right? And so if I were to distill down, and of course I can talk a lot about this, and perhaps we can later as well, but if I were to distill down, what are the lessons learned? I mean, it's all the way from, let's say, 2008 to 2007, 8 to 2016 when UPI was launched. Well, that is a 10-year journey.
Right.
Then the adoption is another 5 years plus. That's a 15-year end-to-end journey.
That also thanks to pandemic and all this,
And
because of
various factors, and it's very difficult to isolate which factors precisely led to it. But at the end of the day, it was a long journey.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, I don't think we should wait another 15 years or another 10 years to have the next UPI, so to speak. Right? And I think there's an opportunity today to say, how can we not just provide a solution, but provide a plethora of solutions across the ecosystem, across industries, across sectors. And what are the lessons that we have possibly learned from the UPI's journey as critical ingredients which led to a large part to
Right.
UPI success? Right?
Another thing, like, which we are constantly trying right now, and we also get the UPI example every time we go meet different people, is the open source success. So normally, like everyone, like people like me who come from technology background, but more from the industry side, like and many of us who have spent majority of their career in the industry in US or India or any, there is obsession towards the paid platforms or the platforms which are made in US or the private platforms. Sometimes when we think that quality comes with that only.
Correct.
And open platforms and some things we always thought, or the generation always thought, that that is mostly for pilots, trial and errors. But when we are actually working on the real solutions, we need a paid platform, we need a professional platform, either any of the MNC should provide that, and that is a thought process that has gone. UPI has completely changed that
Yes.
mindset, and it has challenged it in a to the core. Now the thing is that whatever new things are coming out, what is your suggestion? How, as a learning, what you will suggest that we should take away, that how we can adopt this kind of mindset? I think it's not about technology; it's a mindset and the collective effort that you mentioned. So, what is a couple of things that you will mention that people should adopt and learn, that they can actually make such open source successful solutions?
Great. I think that's an absolutely great question. Okay. What I would say are the three critical ingredients of, let me call this the UPI approach.
Right.
Not the UPI product, not the journey,
Yeah.
the UPI
approach or mindset.
mindset,
Yeah.
which basically then translates into mindset.
Right.
That has three ingredients to it. Right? Number one is pick a challenging situation. Perhaps the most challenging situation in your domain.
Right.
And I'm deliberately using the word challenging situation and not use case. Right? Now, in the UPI journey, the situation that was constantly talked about as the shining example was, how do you pay an auto wala in real time? Not a vegetable vendor. A vegetable vendor can take his or her time.
Right.
Right.
Auto wala can't.
Auto wala can't. The payment has to be like here and now.
Right.
Right. A
Right.
vendor can take 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds while the payment comes through. That is the most challenging situation. If you address that challenging situation, all other use cases by definition will automatically get solved. So if you think about it, the Mobile Payment Forum of India was not setting itself up to make better, cheaper or faster banks or ATM machines. Right? Not to reduce the energy, which itself would have been a great problem. But I'm just saying that was not the problem. It was saying, solve this challenging situation. That's one ingredient. The second ingredient is get unlike minds together. And I'll tie all of this up together
Right.
in terms of where the open source comes in.
Right.
Get unlike minds together, because those unlike minds will push you towards innovative, creative solutions. The idea is not just a solution, but along the way, innovation should happen. Which is why UPI is thing. It's not, it's not a real-time payment thing. It's UPI is distinctively different. Right. So it's not just about creating a solution, but along the way you have innovation which comes in.
Right.
And the third component is work towards a democratic solution, which is ultra high in performance or quality, ultra low in price, very affordable, and fundamentally scalable. Now, if you put all of these stacked up together, right, and if I say I have two tech options, right, closed source, paid, or open source, customizable, which one would you choose? The natural choice is open source. Correct.
Right.
So see, when you choose technology choices, right, it's not about open source or closed source. It's like, what do you want to achieve?
Right.
Right. How you can't control scalability. You can't control price. You can't control quality. You can't control the iterativeness in the innovative process, which will eventually lead to quote unquote UPI. Right. You start with what you have, which, as I said, you have standards, IMPS, USSD. Everybody thought, yeah, that's the killer app, so to speak. It's not an app, but it's the killer
solution.
It's the killer channel.
Right.
No, right? It didn't quite work out. And then suddenly you had changes, and then you could actually customize it and do it as you wished. Right? So I think the answer is clearly, might take a bit longer, build your own. Because that's where the opportunity is today, right? And if people just talking, hey, why can't, just the way we've done it in UPI, why can't we do it in the agri stack? Why can't we do it in the health stack? Why can't we do it in other domains?
Right.
Right. And especially India being obviously a very large country, you know, it doesn't impress people if you've got 50 million customers or 100 million people using things. You know, you're like, you know, we are now, our mindset is population scale.
Right.
Aadhaar is 1.2 billion people, right? UPI is 300 million. By 2030, it might be inching towards a billion, but it's built in that framework. And that then allows you a whole range of other customizations, which may not be apparent initially, like voice interfaces. Right? I should be able to use my voice to be able to initiate a transaction. Maybe not authenticate the transaction, but at least to initiate the transaction. Right? Hey, I want to pay Rahul 10 rupees.
Right.
Right? Now, all of this adds up. All of this starts adding up. And it's very difficult to foresee how technology will actually change. And the only way you can really enhance the underlying solution experience is if you are open source, which means you're customizable, which means you can run your own experiments. And that's exactly what has happened in UPI.
All right. So, is the UHI is the next one that you are working on, or is it the next area where the same application will find its same platform or same solution will find its application?
I think there could be many.
Obviously, there is many, but health is one thing.
Many. It's a little hard to predict, and I'll be a little hesitant in predicting the future. I'm even sometimes hesitant on predicting the past. But
Okay.
but it's a little hard. I mean, it is sensible, and it's quite easy to ask, hey, you've done UPI, what's next?
Right.
I would actually say that I think we have an opportunity of not saying what's the next UPI. I would say the opportunity is what are the next 100 UPIs? What are the next 1,000 UPIs? Right. And what I mean by that is there'll be certain things that will be done by the government.
Right, absolutely.
By the government, right? But I think this approach is something that should be encapsulated by all startups.
Right.
By all
That was the
companies.
idea.
Correct. All startups and all companies, because there's certain things, payments have to have RBI's backbone, otherwise it's not going to work.
Correct.
Right. But okay, fine. There are certain things that would be state subjects, but then there's a whole bunch of other solutions that are needed within the economy, which can be done by startups.
Yeah.
And which will be done by startups.
We as an incubator, we are supporting mostly AI startups.
Sure.
And we have today on our premises 80 plus startups, in our community 900 plus startups, and which is pan India across the country. And the major challenge that we are facing, or all of our startups are facing, is the skill.
Right.
So we don't have sufficient or enough number of people who are trained or skilled in AI,
Right.
or who are skilled enough to deal with AI problems.
Sure.
Now the thing is that, and always everywhere I go, be it any conference, event or something, I'm sure you also must be facing that AI will take away jobs. And I'm saying everywhere there are a lot of unfilled jobs, open jobs where we don't have the resources. So I'm not at all bothered about how many jobs AI will take away. But what is bothering me is that what will happen to that skill gap which is there in the market. So what is your take, like how we solve this problem, and what, as an academician yourself, or IIT Madras as an institute, or as a whole, whatever you're seeing across the country at a policy level, what are the things or the new initiatives that are coming out to solve this challenge?
Excellent question. I think a couple of quick points or quick reactions to your question. Number one, it's not that just we are facing this problem. I think it's a problem the world over.
World over, right.
So it's not just that
India or
specific,
right. But at least like from an India perspective,
Sure.
or from
So I'll
your
come to that.
personal experience,
Correct.
whatever you are seeing.
Correct. So I think number one is that it's a global problem.
Right, absolutely.
And I think we are all on the same footing and all on the same page, right? So that's point number one. Point number two is AI. It's now very clear that AI is not going away anywhere.
Is there to stay.
It's here to stay.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything, it will only get deeper.
So can
and more
I
entrenched.
get a
Go for it.
statement from you here, like not a controversial statement,
Sure.
but that can be a quote of the day. So we saw the lot of technological things, like we saw the trend of, or the hype of big data. We saw the hype of many new technologies. We saw the hype of blockchain, and then the AI came, and many people comment that AI is a fag, and it will go away in next 6 months, and after 1 year nobody will talk about AI, and then something new will come. So is it that Gaurav Raina is very confident that it is not going away and it is there to stay for next decade and couple of decades?
I personally think that AI is here to stay for eternity or close to eternity.
So we'll make this as a statement.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's it's a combination of, it can be described in a combination of things. It's like intelligent electricity.
Right.
Can you imagine a world without electricity? Right? We won't be sitting here without electricity. But
Right.
it's intelligent electricity. It's actually doing intelligent decision making.
Right. Right.
That's one way of looking at it. How modern society doesn't work without electricity.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of its size and magnitude, it'll probably be possibly bigger than the internet and mobile combined, right? And it's, some people call it an industrial revolution. It's more of a cognitive revolution, right? And so I think we are sitting at an incredible opportunity where we can use and harness AI, first, in my opinion, first and foremost, to truly amplify human potential.
Right.
Right. And then subsequently solve
Other
problems
things,
around us.
yes.
Who's going to solve the problems? Humans. So first, let's enable humans.
Right.
Right. Education, healthcare, financial services. Make
Whatever.
sure that we are at our productive, most
Best,
creative
yeah.
best. You do that, humans will go ahead and solve all of the problems. Right.
Right.
My view, so.
No, that's a great. Yeah, coming back to the skill thing.
Now, coming back, we have to, I think it's an opportunity that we have to think, take a little step back, but I don't think we should take too long to take a step back, right? There are three things that are needed, right? One is AI education. One is AI skilling.
Right.
And one is the ability to do research and have a research mindset. Right? Now, the reason you would want the AI, or generally AI research, or generally the research mindset, is because the world is frankly turning very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Simple-ish problems are not there anymore.
Right.
In fact, those simple-ish problems will start getting solved by automation and by intelligence.
Right.
And what will remain would be complicated problems. Right? So we need these three. Right? Okay. Now this is what we want. Right? And this is not something that is going to be delivered very quickly or immediately, but we should at least recognize the full plethora of what we want. Now let's come to education first. Right? There, I think we have to realize that AI is not just CS plus. There is computer science. So we're looking at a BTech in computer science will be very different than a BTech in AI. It's not because the number of courses is just much more. Right? So if you think about computer science, usually most computer science departments have three components to them, right? There's a theory component, there's a systems component, and an AI ML component has been there.
Right.
But if you look at AI, right, then that also has three components, but that has a computing layer: programming, algorithms, data structures, databases. It has a math layer: calculus, probability statistics, linear algebra, optimization. And then you combine the computing layer with the math layer with the data layer to get supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, and Gen AI. This is bare bones. Right? So not just that, there is a very different mindset which is needed in AI as compared to just pure CS. Okay? So it's a very different mental model that is actually needed.
Right.
So there, I think one of the things to do is, where we have a great opportunity, is to rethink and reimagine what we teach, how we teach, and how we scale it up. Right? Because just the IITs or the NITs or the triple IITs in India are never going to be enough to provide the talent base for AI for the country. So I think there is an opportunity, I think, to rethink and reimagine how we teach, what we teach, and how we scale it up. And in a similar way, we have to do it for the skilling piece, which is making AI work in practice.
Right.
And a similar way, we have to think about research, which is how do we keep developing IP over this, over this domain. And I think there is a great opportunity that we're sitting on again today, right? And I think I see that as one of the biggest opportunities per se. The question you asked about what's the next, what's the next UPI, so to speak. I think the biggest opportunity we are sitting on today is how do we use AI, right,
To build the
at one level
workforce.
to actually educate, skill, and research
Right.
the astronomical population that we have, which is young, which is aspiring, which is all ready to go.
Right. And I take that as a validation of this complete event called Mathademia that we thought of. Because our this event's objective was that bringing math and academia together. Because our focus was more on the academia,
Right.
like how we, enable the academia to train, skill, and bring the workforce right in the market where there is a serious skill gap. Coming back to the next thought now, we covered UPI, we covered scaling app. Now, in terms of life, as a last section, I will say, if I have to understand from you, how you see AI will impact India in coming century or coming couple of decades, if I have to say. So, what is your vision or your thought for AI for India or AI for Bharat, as we say?
Sure. So I think I'll just tail off a little bit with the previous comment you made, and I think the comment that the point I'd like to make and really emphasize
Sure.
is the inherent need for ecosystems which enable seamless collaboration and partnerships, where math plays a very, very important role.
Right.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, you need platforms, you need ecosystems which allow different stakeholders to come in and in a seamless way learn, interact, converse, and build together, right? So I can't sort of emphasize enough the need for platforms like the ones you're trying to build.
Absolutely.
Right?
Thank you for
I
that.
simply cannot emphasize that enough, right?
Right. Actually,
That's
I was
critical.
right. So that is like we take our motivation completely as a center, as a organization, completely from your UPI thought or
Correct.
UPI mindset, what you
Correct.
said, because that
Correct.
is what we are doing, and
Correct.
we should be inspired from that. But absolutely, thank you, Professor Raina, for validating and supporting this thought.
Sure.
But yeah, coming back to like the question, like AI for
Sure,
Bharat.
great. Now, I would say, I mean, I won't use a sort of a sort of grandiose, more grandiose things like vision, AI vision for India. I would
Right.
probably call it the sort of, I'll give you some thoughts on what I think could constitute the pathway,
Right.
the AI pathway for India, so to speak. Right. Now, let's just go back a little bit onto AI.
Mm-hmm.
Right. AI is, some of us are scared. Right.
A lot of us are scared.
Some of us are excited. Right.
Yes.
But frankly, all of us will have to innovate. All of us will have to innovate.
Right.
That's one. Second, AI in theory, as I mentioned earlier, is computing layer, math plus computing plus data layer. Fine. AI in practice is compute, data, models.
Right.
Right? That's in practice. Okay? Great. A large part of the narrative today is that to be really successful in AI, you need to be extra large. Right? Extra large in compute, extra large in data, extra large in resources, extra large in the models. Unless your model is the biggest model in town, forget it. Right? So that's, let's say, put that in the AI bucket. Right? These are the 3 or 4 ingredients that are there in the AI bucket.
Right.
So now let's look at India in abstraction. So in a sense, AI is large, it's complex, it is diverse. Right? Okay, now let's come to India. India is also
Large.
complex, and diverse.
Right.
And that is an opportunity. So if you look at the linguistic diversity, if you look at the cultural factors, if you look at the socio-economic elements across the Indian ecosystem, then that is large, complex, and diverse. Right? So you've got AI, as I've described it in perhaps simplistic terms, and you've got, let's say, India, as I've described it, perhaps in simplistic terms. Now we need to marry these two.
Right.
Right? Now my claim is they ought to be married through the UPI approach, which is big challenging situations which are Indian in context, get
Right.
unlike minds together, work towards a democratic solution. If you view these two, AI in India through that lens, you don't see one problem. You don't see one opportunity. You see 10,000 opportunities across education, healthcare, financial services, transportation, communication, agriculture, manufacturing, energy, security, defense, name it. And in this, what happens is because you're solving a very specific Indian problem, you, by its very definition, will have smaller, curated data sets, which will need smaller, contextualized models, which will need smaller compute resources, which by definition, the back-end cost of your solution will be cheaper. And the Indian context, the Indian setup can easily absorb 10,000 solutions. Right? And when it has reached a level of sophistication, it has reached, there's product market fit, it has reached the last mile, right? Where you really fine-tuned the entire process, you'll actually be ready with an India Plus product, which will be ready for the global south, right? In much the same way that UPI has done,
Right.
is doing right now, right? In much the same way. And once you get to that level, you would have inbuilt innovation along the way. You have control over the technology, as we discussed earlier, because it's open source. You're in charge of it, right? Which will allow you to really have 10,000 flowers bloom, right? Will actually have 10,000 flowers bloom. So I think the opportunity here is, in summary, not a thing, but a multiplicity of things. In that, I do think that a little bit of a strategic focus should be on human-centric AI. AI which is, which is aiming to
More human.
amplify human potential.
Right.
That is the immediate opportunity that we have. Right. I mean, if I were to try and give it a little bit of a prioritization, I would be a little bit, I'd put my chips on that
Right.
a little bit, because that is our competitive advantage,
Right.
right? Which is where we are sitting together.
So, if I have to ask you from a very startup perspective, the
Sure.
basic question that every entrepreneur would like to understand, that you see a lot of things that is happening around AI. You have mentioned about your thoughts, but one industry which you think is the immediate need of the hour for AI application. I understand like AI will have its application across, right? But for India, what is that one area which is the burning need as per your thought and experience, which needs immediate attention from the AI practitioners or AI entrepreneurs perspective?
I think fintech gets a lot of mind space.
Okay.
However, I would say education.
Education.
Absolutely.
And not healthcare, agri-tech?
You asked me to pick one.
Yeah, the first one, if I have to say. The first one,
I would be a little tempted to say
education.
I would little be tempted to say education.
Okay.
Right. Because see, there are numerous ingredients out there which are also needed. Some element of digitization and automation, some element of actually needed, which is why fintech takes off, because by definition it's a domain which is constantly adopting technology.
But I also understand from where your thought is coming, and I also support that, because if education, that place is taken care
Yes.
at the first place, that will take care of the rest of the things
Yes.
eventually.
Yeah, eventually. And I think fairly rapidly. I wouldn't even say eventually. Right?
Right.
Because if you look at health space, right, health, if you would say, is composed of three elements. There's illness, there's wellness, there's lifestyle.
Right.
Right. So when we think of health, we shouldn't think of illness. We should think of AI making better lifestyle choices so you don't get ill.
Yeah, yeah. The wellness and the lifestyle, that's where the AI plays major role.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. But I think if you were to ask me to pick one, then I would probably be a little tempted to choose education.
Education.
If it was a broader bucket, I would say human-centric AI.
Human-centric.
Which
right.
is education, healthcare, financial services,
Mhm.
right, across these. Of course, within the Indian context, we really have to find ways of enhancing the agriculture space, given the number of people who are in agriculture, right? But I think across these,
Right.
but I think there could, I think there could be some fairly quick wins in the education and skilling space, which then spills over into all of these other domains.
Right,
Right?
absolutely.
It spills over very quickly. Given the fact that we've got a large, population between 18 and 35, 18 and 36, right? Of course, if you're starting to educate somebody who's 6 years old, it's going to take a long time before that payoff comes in the workspace, right? But I think if we think creatively about how do we skill, upskill, and get everybody in the correct mind space of people who are sitting in the 18 to 35, 18 to 36 bucket.
Right. Professor Raina, if I have to ask you, how was your experience?
I think what you've touched upon are, to be honest, really the central issues of the day, right? Which is we have to see what successes we've had and what we've learned from them.
Right,
We have to see where we are today
right,
and how we can reimagine a future.
absolutely.
Right. And I think you frankly covered, I think all the key points. If you're able to align many more people,
Mm-hmm.
right, not with specifics, but at least a general direction or a mindset,
Right,
right, harnessing what is our unique and competitive advantage. And I think that is critical. Right. I don't think we should be looking at the West in any way.
Absolutely,
I
yeah.
think we have a great opportunity
within India.
within India, and that over time becomes an India plus opportunity.
I really thank you for your time that you have spent.
I will. Thank you so much again for the conversation, but I would reiterate that
Sure.
that viewpoints such as these and many more, this is just
Right.
viewpoints, have to come across or have to be debated, discussed, cemented, and action taken through platforms like yourselves.
Correct. Absolutely.
There has to be some place where everybody comes and meets. The sort of
Everybody joins hands,
The
yeah.
ideas town square.
Right, right.
There has to be some place. Otherwise, it's all too disparate, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. Too scattered.
Too
Yeah.
scattered, right? And so there, I can't emphasize enough what I think would be an absolutely stellar role that you are playing and you will play in getting these unlike minds together, debating it across, across all sections of society, and helping co-create the pathway, which is truly a win-win for everybody. So
That's the idea.
thank you so much for actually doing all of the work. I just came across and offered some thoughts.
Thanks, Professor Raina. So I hope all of you have liked this conversation, and I'm hopeful that if you have more questions, you want to learn more about AI and thoughts, please feel free to share your questions with us. If you have particular questions from Professor Raina, that also you can share with us, and we make sure that we will get those questions answered for you. And what I can say is that keep following us and like, share, and comment in our video. And we'll come back soon with another great speaker and great thought leader in our next conversation. Thank you for watching us. Thank you for supporting Math.